Welcome everyone to Dr. John Bedker's Leadership Podcast, the podcast focused on leadership. The episode will begin shortly. Thank you so much for tuning in. Enjoy the podcast.
Today is April the 4th, 2023. This has been a historic day. For the first time in American history, a former president of the United States was indicted. Never before in American history has a former president of the United States been indicted. Today, Donald J. Trump, now defendant Trump, was indicted on 34 felony charges. Yes, a truly historic day. But just not in a good way. Thank you all for tuning in to the Dr. John Bedker Leadership Podcast. I am your host, John Bedker. This podcast is all about leadership. It has been my life's work and my life's passion. As I have repeatedly made clear, leadership boils down to sort of one simple axiom. Do the right thing. Wow, doesn't that just sound so simple? Well, yes, it is that simple. But in reality, it is quite a high bar. And we're going to talk about that today. Let me share with you a few more leadership axioms. That will be the purpose, the intent of this podcast as we all contemplate today's historic event. A former President of the United States, a former Commander-in-Chief of all U.S. armed forces, and largely considered the leader of the free world. A leader whose voice and actions are listened to, whose voice and actions reverberate all around the world. The President of the United States is called to be a world leader. And now, this former president, Donald Trump, is a defendant in a criminal proceeding in New York on 34 felony counts. This we know, and we know it factually. For all of us, you've heard me say this many times, facts, facts, facts. These are key and critical cornerstones for leaders. And today, yes, we do know this factually. Prospectively, Donald Trump may, and on this I want to emphasize may, face as many as 3 additional court actions. In Georgia, he may be charged for seeking to overturn the Georgia presidential election count. In Florida, for taking, concealing, and retaining classified documents. And in D.C., as the facilitator of an attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. So, what does all this mean for us? Leaders seeking to do our jobs. That's who we are. That's why I do this podcast. It is our life's work and mission. To do the best that we can, to lead those we serve. To do this to the best of our abilities. And, as I continue to say, and I will continue to say more, leaders are challenged to do the right thing. So, people say this and it's almost funny or glib, but I think it's important. I am not a lawyer. Absolutely not. I'm not a politician. Absolutely not. What I am is a PhD with subject matter expertise in leadership and organizational behavior. So let's be very clear. Politics and the law, that's not the focus of what we're talking about here today. It's not my thing. It is leadership that we're here to discuss. So I said in the opening that we should, on this historic day, kind of think about some axioms for leaders. Think about what we need to revisit on a day like today. So let's talk about some leadership axioms. I begin with one that I've mentioned several times in other podcasts, and that is the notion of we lead not for self, but for others. What I call non-sibby, not for self. Non-sibby is a good cornerstone for leaders. Serving others rather than ourselves. That's an axiom. That's a touchstone, I think, important to keep track of today. And certainly in the context of the indictment of the former President Donald Trump, were his actions, were the cornerstones of his being for others, or were they for himself? Well, each will reach their own conclusion. But from this seat, it seems very clear. Quite honestly, not questionable. He really is self-motivated, self-oriented. It isn't about others, it's about him. Let's talk about a book I've mentioned in the past by the Pulitzer Prize winner Doris Kearns Goodwin. It's a book about leadership. It talks about presidents that were leaders. Seems appropriate on this day of the indictment of Donald Trump. She talks about leadership traits, and she says the number one leadership trait is empathy. Caring for others, of subordinating oneself again to be an aid, a support, an assistance for those you serve, to be empathetic. And again, we have to think about this indictment and the former president. Is he trying to be empathetic? Is he trying to hear, to listen, and to be helpful in support of others? And again, I think each one is entitled to their own conclusion, but there seems little doubt that the answer to that is no. He is not an empathetic leader. He certainly has had incredible positions of leadership, but his exercise of empathy seems quite absent. Let's talk about another axiom that I've mentioned in several podcasts before again, and that is this issue of trust. To be effective as a leader, we have to win the trust of those we serve. And how do we do that? Again, the answer is simple, but the reality is quite a high bar. We win the trust of others through a regular and repeated demonstration of trustworthy behavior. Trust is gained from trustworthy behavior. Well, we look at that and think again about the indictment today. Is that a trait, a leadership trait, that we see in the former president? And again, everyone entitled to their opinion, but it seems clear from this seat that the answer is no. Trustworthy behavior is not a hallmark of Donald Trump. The reasons for this indictment today is an issue of making payments to a porn star about an alleged affair he had with her, to keep this information quiet out of the public forum just prior to his election as president. Well, again, this is a married man whose wife had just having a child, and this is the conduct that he was accused. And again, not a lawyer, not going to go into the legal of this, but it seems that if one was running for the highest leadership office in the world, frankly, that they would be guided by doing the right thing all the time. That their earning of every person's trust would be very, very high on the list. And a person that may or may not have been having an affair with this person or others, and there are allegations of others as well, and seeing his public statements, which are not in dispute, about actions he might take because of his status and position. These would not be trustworthy actions. So on this issue of trust as an important leadership axiom, I think we have to conclude once again that the answer is no. Now, what happens certainly in this political world is people say things. They say a lot of things, which may or may not be true. We live in an age of misinformation, disinformation, and sadly, tragically, lying. People running for office may feel compelled to exaggerate the truth, to state mistruths. What do we as leaders need to know about that? Well, it is important to judge people by what they do, not what they say. That is a key. Judge people not by what they say, but by what they do. Think about that. You're in this meeting, back and forth, person says one thing, you agree, you proceed, and they do something different. Yeah. Judge people by what they do rather than what they say. Now here's one from politics. Again, we're not taking a stand here, but from a leadership point of view. The late Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, and I've mentioned him several times because this saying that he advanced, I think, has particular importance today. And here it is. Senator Moynihan said that everyone is entitled to their own point of view, their own perspective. Yeah. And as leaders, we want that. We want to hear others' points of view, others' perspective. And we like these things to be unfiltered, right? We want to hear, what do you really think? How do you really feel? How do you really see this challenge, this problem, this dilemma? I want to not only listen, but hear from you. I want to hear your point of view. Senator Moynihan goes on, though, to say that what we are not entitled to is our own facts. And there's the catch. Facts. As leaders, we are grounded by facts, the truth. We want to ensure that we're speaking factually, truthfully, that we can in fact corroborate these facts and truths, and that we stand by them. We don't tell person A one story and person B another story because it might suit their points of view. No. Everyone is entitled to their own point of view, their own perspective, but not their own facts. This is a key axiom for leaders. Be grounded in facts, advance facts, and only facts, and share them consistently with each of those you serve. And what's the payoff for this? And not just this last axiom, but all of them. The payoff is what in academic language is called a psychological contract. If somebody needs something, they need help, they need support, they may need resources, whatever it is, and they come to you and say, could you, would you, please help me? I know you're not required to. I know it's not absolutely necessarily yours to do. But I really think you could be a valuable asset. Will you help me? And that leader says, yes, I will. Because they believe it's the right thing to do, and they clearly are unable to accomplish this next step on their own. They need help. And you say, yes, I will help you, even though I don't directly or contractually, whatever, have to help you. I'm not required to do that. But you're not making that point. What you're saying is, you came to me for help, and I am freely giving that help to you. So what happens then when that coin is turned? Sometime, who knows when, sometime later, you need a helping hand. And for leaders, all of us are going to be in that position someday, and some of you are in that position today. And you think, that person could really help me. Their skill sets, their resources would be an aid in the effort that I need help with. And you go to them. Well, because you helped them before, they are in fact more likely to help you with the current issue. This is that not binding contract, but a psychological contract. if I help you, some point in the future, you may help me. And I think that's pretty important in this day and age, that we help one another whenever it is in advancing the right thing. So, a couple of things in closing. One, I hope the little cold I'm dealing with hasn't come across too strongly in this podcast, but I wanted to get it out. I wanted to get it out because it was a historic day, an important day, a day for leaders to think about what we have now seen and observed, what the legal and political world is dealing with, but what we as leaders also need to think about and deal with. And this coming Friday is Good Friday. Some of you may be celebrating that, looking forward to an Easter. And I just want to wish you all a Good Friday. Thank you all, everyone. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for tuning in to Dr. John Bedker's Leadership Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please tell your friends, and, of course, please follow our podcast and subscribe. Thank you again for tuning in.